Alright, what I have here before me is a very interesting piece of work, not very well known to many. It is called the long lost chapter of the Acts of the Apostles, otherwise known as the long lost chapter of the book of Acts. Another title for this work would be the 29th chapter of the book of Acts, and it contains the account of the Apostle Paul's journey into Spain, Britain, as well as many other places in Western Europe. And it has a remarkable prediction concerning Britain's inheritance. This work was translated by C.S. Sonini, hence why this work is also known as the C.S. Sonini manuscript. It is from an original manuscript found in the archives of Constantinople. Constantinople is an ancient name, and if you were to look it up on a map, it would be located where present-day Turkey sits today. It was presented to C.S. Sonini. This manuscript was presented to him by this individual named Sultan Abdul Ahmed. So it's a very interesting piece of work. Again, it's not very well known, but we're going to take a look at some information concerning what it contains. Okay, so let's read. It says, the Sonini manuscript contains the account of Paul's journey to Spain as well as Britain. The document purported to be the concluding portion of the Acts of the Apostles. It covers a portion of the period after Paul's two-year enforced residence in Rome. So let's read this little section here. It says that the manuscript was found interleaved in a copy of Sonini's work. It was purchased at the sale of a library. And here it says that the document was translated by C.S. Sonini from an original Greek manuscript. So it was originally written in the Greek, and it was translated by C.S. Sonini. And it was found again in the archives at Constantinople. Constantinople, if you were again to look it up in an ancient map, you would find it to be where present-day Turkey sits today. And it was presented to C.S. Sonini by Sultan Abdul Ahmed. And the following is the contents of the title page of Sonini's work, in which the English translation of the document was found. So, very interesting. And it's going to get even more interesting as I expound on it. And okay, so this is a copy of the Sonini manuscript. It says chapter 29. It does not say chapter 29 of what book or what ancient text, but again, as it says here, it is dubbed the 29th chapter of the book of Acts, the lost chapter of the book of Acts. So, and I will expound on it. I will have it online. I want to do this online because it's kind of tedious to do it, recording raw material. But I want to show you that I am very much acquainted with this work. I have it with me, and let's read the first verse, just so I can give you guys a taste of what I will be expounding on. Okay, so verse 1 says, "And Paul, full of the blessing of Christ and abounding in the Spirit, departed out of Rome, determining to go where? Into Spain. For he had a long time purpose to journey there, and was minded also to go from thence to Britain." See how the names are not just plain, just like that. No coded names or anything. Verse 2. For he had heard in Phoenicia. Okay. Let's go back to verse 1. I want to show you something. Verse 1. Okay, Paul was full of the blessings of Christ and abounding in the Spirit. He left Rome and he was determined to go into Spain. Now, can we find from the scriptures, from our mainstream Bible, the Canon Bible, any verse that supports Paul visiting Spain? Yes, we can. Turn over to the book of Romans, chapter 15. See that? Romans chapter 15. The book of Romans, chapter 15. And read chapter 24. It says, chapter 24, this is what it says. Let me hold it still. I'm shaking over here. Okay. It says, whensoever I take my journey into Spain, I will come to you, for I trust to see you in my journey, and to be brought on my way there by you, if first I be somewhat filled with your company. There it is. So far, the opening verse of the 29th chapter of the book of Acts, this Sonini manuscript, is very much in line with what it says as far as Romans chapter 15 and verse 24 goes, that he did intend to take a trip into Spain. Remember, he was apostle of the heathen, but there were also some of his own kindred in those nations. And is that the only verse, Jerry, that we could expound on? No, it is not. Just same chapter. Go to verse 28. It says, when therefore I have performed this, and have sealed to them this fruit, I will come by you into Spain. See that? Right from the canon. Verse 28, verse 24. So, verse 1 very much cross-references what it says in Romans 15 in those two verses. Paul was determined to go into Spain, and he mentioned it in the book of Romans. For he had a long time purpose to journey there, and he was minded also to go from thence to Britain, which brings us to the next place, Britain. Verse 2, for he had heard in Phoenicia, Paul had heard in Phoenicia, that certain of his own kinfolk, the children of Israel, about the time of the Assyrian captivity, had escaped by sea to the isles afar off. That's a very key name right here, the isles afar off, as spoken by the prophet and called by the Romans Britain. Now, we're going to examine this. They're tying the isles afar off to Britain. Are the isles afar off mentioned anywhere in the canon Bible? And can we tie them to Britain? According to verse 2 of the 29th chapter of the book of Acts, the lost chapter of the book of Acts. Well, I'm not familiar with the prophet Ezra saying this in regards to the isles afar off, but Isaiah very much speaks of the isles afar off. Isaiah chapter 66 verse 19 says, and I will set a sign among them, and I will send those that escape of them, talking about Israel, the exiled Israelites. God will set a sign among them, and he will send his own people that escape from this exile onto the nations. What nations? To Tarshish, Pul, Lut, that draw the bow, Tubal and Javan. And, this is very important, to the isles afar off. What's another word for isle? An island. To the islands afar off. Now, where could that be? It says, to the isles afar off that have not heard my fame, neither have seen my glory. And they shall declare my glory. Who is they? His people, the Israelites, shall declare my glory among the Gentiles. So it's dealing with not just the Gentiles that are in these places that are being mentioned, but his people that he's sending to these places, his exiled people that would go to these Gentile places to preach and spread his message. Now focus on this. To the isles afar off. Again, another word for isle is island. To the islands afar off. Let's go back to chapter 2. The isles afar off. Now, in Europe, what's an island that would be considered afar off from Israel? Could it be Cyprus, Greece, that little island right across Israel? Nope, that's pretty close, isn't it? So it can't be an island afar off. It says islands. So just think, use some common sense. It's not Britain, the UK considered a bunch of little islands? Yep. Hence why it's called Britain. So there, it's very much in accordance with the prophecies of Isaiah chapter 66 and verse what? Verse 19. It speaks about the prophecy concerning the exiled children of Israel and to the nations that are being mentioned here, to the isles afar off that have not heard of the Savior, and his people will declare God's glory among the Gentiles. Again, the word isles afar off, islands afar off. We just read, it is prophetic. So, and look at verse 2. Remember, Isaiah's prophecy, for Paul had heard in Phoenicia that certain of the children of Israel about the time of the Assyrian captivity had escaped. So see, they're exiled. When they were exiled, they left Assyria. They escaped the captivity, and they escaped by sea, by ships, to the islands afar off. Not one little island that is right across from Israel, which would be Cyprus, but the islands afar off. Where would that be around that area? Afar off, that is Britain, spoken by the prophet Isaiah or Esdras, which I'm not familiar with Esdras' prophecy, but Isaiah does speak of it. They inserted this word, but maybe they meant Isaiah, who knows? And called by the Romans Britain. So you see, there were Israelites in Britain, in the UK, in those islands. Remember, we read that you had the tribe of Dan during the Assyrian captivity that escaped by sea, so that could be tied to the tribe of Dan, who sailed to the isles afar off. And also Spain. Might have been some there as well. We don't know. But it does reference that there were some in Britain, which reminds me of the tribe of Dan and their escape in sea to those same places, which I made a video on. So I'm going to expound on this, but I just wanted to give you a taste. And I got a lot more interesting information. And it's going to make some of these haters mad, but so be it. Shalom.